bunch of you said that you wanted to see more of the Owl House videos, kind of. So today we'll be reacting to Jenny Cooke's video about Boscha. 5 months ago she made a video on Zootopia not being good, and I really liked the movie Zootopia, but she made a lot of really good points in it, and so I highly recommend watching that after watching this. Before getting into it, a lot of side characters in a lot of shows are just like interesting, and it just sucks that they're not like a main character or important for the overarching storyline of whatever show that they're a part of. So Boscha is a character that we don't get too much information about, but there's enough to do a whole video essay about. What's her deal? A closer look at Boscha by Jenny Cooke.
There's no profound explanation for Boscha's bad behavior, no tragic reason that contextualizes the bulk of her actions. She is, by her own admission, a flat and static character.
I just want to do normal things and look great and play grudge me with my team!
In a bubble, this declaration is not noteworthy. Flat characters are a storytelling necessity, but it's particularly peculiar because the Owl House goes out of its way to give every named character some depth and nuance. The stern principal is actually a good teacher who loves his students. The mischievous twins struggle with broader questions of identity and individualism.
There's usually a big focus on like teenage insecurity in the bit, and when we saw that they were using glamour, Edric and I forget her name, they both stuck out because it's like, oh, they use this magic to like hide their acne, and so that way they don't have to like cover their hair. And you know, like a lot of teenagers going through it, I'll just say that depression like hits for a lot of them, and then they just lose interest in like taking care of themselves and their appearance, but like they would still like to be pretty and attractive and look nice, and having access to that magic is just something that they can use to kind of give into the laziness of the spiral that depression like pulls people into, while also still being able to pay attention to like how they look and are perceived as others. And then on top of that, they're also just rascals, and they're tons of fun for that. But when they initially was like, oh, we'll give you this magic bracelet thing that we had that exposes their insecurities to Amity and Luz before the tournament, towards the finale, that was just like one moment that like made them feel really real. I think every character, they need to have that realistic element to make them feel like, well, why is this character doing anything at all? Like, what drives them? In She-Ra, a lot of people really struggled to contextualize Catra's actions, because like she's just being mean for the sake of it. But the show has to present flashbacks in episode 11 Promise to be like, okay, well, Catra was really close to Adora, and Adora ended up bailing on her. But like, why is Catra still with the Horde? That part was never really touched upon. So a lot of people felt like Catra was like shoehorned into the villainess role without like understanding the idea that she grew up in the Horde. She doesn't know what life's going to be like outside of it. And she doesn't like want to be evil, but like that's kind of all she knows. She's just going to embrace that familiarity instead of risk it. And who knows, maybe the rebellion will treat her just as bad as it is at the Horde, so why even leave? That's the question that didn't really get touched upon with Catra, so only people who could really resonate with Catra's backstory could, like, understand that. A lot of people didn't for a lot of it. And I think there's an element with Boscha where they just didn't highlight that reason why Boscha became a prick. And so it's just like, oh, it's just evil for the sake of being a dick, without also realizing that there's a social hierarchy with kids, like with Edric and his sister, that there's like this insecurity, because like, okay, the better I present myself, the higher up I'm placed on the social ladder, and you can be a good person, be really outgoing, be great at sports, Boscha, Amity, be great in class, like my siblings have been honor students before. There's a number of ways to climb the social hierarchy, but there's another way to do it, and that is to tear people down. That's one thing Boscha does. We see this pretty early on with Amity. Amity is also kind of doing this. We're tearing down Willow because it's like, oh, now that Willow is in abominations with me, Amity knows that Willow's a very talented witch. She doesn't want to have to work harder than she has to maintain her status. And so she opts to tear down Willow's confidence and belittle her. And we see later on when Willow just goes with the plant path, which makes her happy, Amity does express some regret and starts to actively treat Willow much nicer because she's no longer threatened. Her status is no longer threatened. And Boscha doesn't really see it like that way. She's seeing it as a much more broad social hierarchy, not just in terms of the abomination class. and in like friend groups. She's like, no, I need to tear everybody down and constantly talk myself up. Except in this one situation when, in season 3, when Bosch is like, yo, Amity, please come back. It's kind of like, there's this saying, it's lonely at the top, or something along that line. And it's like, what is the point of Boscha? She had Amity this whole time. Amity was with her, and then suddenly it was not. And then the whole process of being on top and being above everybody. And I'm up here, you're down there, loser. It just wasn't fulfilling without her best friends to be there with her. And that's why she begged Amity to come back. And when Amity's like, no, then we see Boscha cares not as much about the social hierarchy, and it's just like, I want to be good at rugby and look good while doing it. The twins also have that. They want to be really good at like spell casting and look good while doing it, even though that like they're still insecure and doing things to mask that. Boscha is also doing that, masking her like insecurity of like not being good enough and not being valued by her peers. I know it's kind of weird to like when you belittle somebody, of course they value you less because you're kind of a prick. It also kind of like sets things in a different matter. You don't need to be loved to be respected. You can be feared and be respected. And that's a little bit more Boscha's direction, versus Amity was less of a prick, still had a lot of respect from pretty much everybody, except not her mom. But yeah, that is an overarching view of Boscha's behavior. And just because they're witches and they're in the Boiling Isles doesn't mean that their experience is that much different from the humans in Earth. It's just that their cultural norms are slightly different. What they learn is slightly different. They all look slightly different. We got the eyeball people, the people who like their faces are just a mouth. And those are all the things that separates the Boiling Isles and their magic from the rest of the world. And Luz very quickly finds out, oh, I was a loser in Earth, I'm a loser also here. But she was in an environment that like rewarded magic, and that's something she really liked. So she was able to enjoy her experience in the Boiling Isles and all the weirdness and the oddities it provided for her. So she was still the same person in almost the same environment. She just had some extra tools at her disposal that rewarded her for being herself. And that is part of Luz's journey. This kind of leads into one of my issues with season 1 of The Owl House, where it kind of like spoon-fed Luz her arc by giving her all the tools she needed to better be herself and fulfill her situations, while all the other characters were kind of set in stone. Like Willow had the journey of like understanding, like, okay, I get that I want to make my dads happy and succeed, and Abomination is more highly viewed than the other magics, and that's one of the reasons where Amity gets her esteem from. And then she's just realized, like, okay, my dads will like me regardless of the path I go, so I'm just gonna go with the plant one that I like. And then she's able to blossom into herself. Pun intended, haha. And Luz is also a similar thing. She just gets to blossom into herself, but she struggled with the whole magical aspect. And then it's like, oh, you get glyphs. You have the incredible support from Ida, King, and Hootie. Unfortunately, they're all just kind of random, and sometimes their help ends up creating more issues than it otherwise would. But one of the biggest things that Luz learned from Ida's transformations, King's immaturity, is she took on like a big sister role to King and an organization role, and gave Ida something to truly live for. And being that rock, being that like glue that held the Owl House together from that point on, to make everybody there behave and take things more seriously, and not really think about the existentialism of life and like what their life means overall, and just focus on Luz and her dreams of becoming a witch. It gave them that vehicle to grow as individuals. And Boscha didn't really have that vehicle. And of course, we can see people's like disappointment manifest in different way, whether they take it out on others or take it out on themselves. That's just some of the biggest things that separate Boscha from the other main characters, in my opinion.
Boscha's lack of depth almost makes her more interesting by comparison. She's simultaneously irrelevant and essential to the Owl House's overarching narrative because she's basically a walking motif.
A short succession of notes producing a single impression. Maybe this is what we're going for. Okay. Yeah, I am illiterate.
And a perfect target.
Friendship is one of the show's core themes. The series treats platonic relationships with the same gravitas as romantic and familial relationships, and I deeply appreciate this portrayal. Friendship is often written off as a lesser bond because there's no sexual component to the connection, but nothing could be further.
This is one of the reasons why the outhouse is really good for ace people, because it treats friendship and romanticism with the same weight, so you can just enjoy the characters' interactions without it feeling like, oh, they're totally gonna bone at the end. It just kind of spoils it. So the outhouse is one of the great things for that. Not really relevant to Jenny's video, but I made like a really long video. Or I don't think 10 minutes is that long, but I made a video where I talked about how shows like Amphibia, The Outhouse, and She-Ra, because they put friendship on a pedestal, it really can make things that much better for certain minorities than other minorities. And that's just one thing I really appreciate. And a lot of people probably don't pick up on that or know about it. I just know this, what Jenny just said, is it's what makes it so enjoyable for some people. And I just wanted to highlight that.
Few things bring me more joy than my friends, and conversely, losing a friend is the deepest heartbreak I know. Each member of Luce's social circle has a relatable story of failed friendship. I've been the overeager nerd who struggled with making connections. I've been the wide-eyed prodigy that people used as a means to an end. I've been the girl who internalized the loss of a friend as a personal failing, and I've been the person who wilted within a friend group that suppressed her authentic self. When you accumulate enough heartbreaking experiences, your brain starts to craft an irrational narrative to help make sense of all the pain. I'm the only common denominator, so I must be the problem.
I don't know if I'm just misunderstanding what was being said just a second ago, but the way I interpreted it is like, okay, everybody has all these different experiences that make up a fulfilling, like, a whole life. Experiences that people can relate to and understand. And we can split up those experiences, hyper-focus on each of them, and put those into a character and make that, like, that specific character's arc. Like how I mentioned the twins and Boscha and Amity, all having, like, their various insecurities and how they deal with them in completely different ways. That's what, like, it's kind of the same story, but told 3 different ways in a way that could resonate with 3 different groups of people. Their experiences collectively, you're supposed to like and resonate with every character, but you're supposed to resonate with some more than others. So that's why some go through very specific issues throughout the entirety of a season or longer, while other ones go through like other issues. And we're supposed to relate to a little bit to each of those experiences.
On the periphery of these narratives lies Boscha, a consistent source of antagonism who seemingly validates all the false notions our favorite characters have internalized about themselves. Luce will always be othered by society. Willow will only ever be half a witch. And Amity will forever be defined by her most toxic relationships.
Hey, Willow! I just thought all trash should stay in one spot.
Boscha's words cut deep, but her opinions are not and never will be a proper gauge of other people's value. She's just a manipulative bully whose self-worth stems from her ability to control the people she loves.
Willow, you were never too weak to be my friend. I was too weak to be yours.
Your healing process can't rely on an apology that may or may not come. Memory is a story we tell ourselves, more rooted in fiction than in fact, because the details...
The part where she's like, I didn't have the strength to be your friend, it's kind of like, just like she was valuing her place in the social hierarchy. And as we've seen from the recent election, like, charisma is the only stat that matters. You can just lie perpetually about things, and as long as you're like outgoing and people enjoy your presence and you're friendly, then they'll just opt to believe you because they like you. And we try to believe the people that we like. We have an expected outlook upon you do X, Y, and Z, you yield X result, especially from like a societal standpoint, whether it's like a job or a friend, relationship, sports, whatever. But a lot of people like, it's too gamified. It's like, at the end of the day, it's like, you enjoy what you do. If you enjoy what you do, you love what you do, then you're going to perform a lot better than somebody who cares too much about the result. So Amity cared too much about the results, and she was making herself miserable, trying to be friends with Boscha and the other popular people and being like the best student that she could be. Like, this all came at the expense of herself and her own happiness, and she couldn't help but take some of that out on others, because she didn't value herself as an individual enough. But when she stopped to care more about her relationships with people who, hanging out with Luz would damage her social reputation. But a life that she's not, like, happy with isn't one that's worth living for her. Yeah, it'd be more valuable for her parents if Amity did stay away from Luz and keep doing what she was told to do. That benefits them. But they're not living Amity's life. Amity is in charge of her own destiny. And she's like, okay, well, if I'm not happy, what's the point of any of this? And then that's when she decides, maybe I don't care that much about Boscha. Yeah, hanging out with her would be beneficial for my future from a utilitarian standpoint, but that's completely devoid of empathy. So when Amity decided that, like, oh yeah, I was too scared about how other people would respond to me embracing, like, the life that I wanted to live, then she was finally able to be like, okay, Willow, okay, I get what I did was wrong. Well, this is also kind of funny because Willow did this to an extent with, like, her parents, where she's being in the Abomination Coven, even though she didn't like it. She figured it out way faster than Amity. But I think that's one of the reasons why Willow was able to forgive Amity so quickly and why they were able to rebond so quickly, because they shared this journey of realizing living for other people is not an existence worth living. And that's probably one of the reasons why this show resonates with so many queer people. Because it's like, hey, like, don't pretend to be straight, cis, or heteronormative. Because you're just going to make yourself miserable. And nobody actually cares as much about you as you. So... And you're going to spend your life with you more than anybody else. Even if you get married, you're going to spend 100% of the time with you, and maybe 50% of the time with your significant other. But that's still, like, just be yourself. Not the you that everybody else wants to be, and then you find out you don't like anything about yourself, and then you fall into a miserable depression and get divorced at the age of 50. That's a very specific example, but it's something that a lot of people lived through from the 50s up until the 90s. The divorce rate, I think, is only going down as of the past 10 years. But from the 50s up until, like, the 2010s, the divorce rate just kept going up because people stopped and had, like, this look at themselves and being like, okay, I just was a cog in the machine the whole time from, like, education, and people are finally looking at, like, fulfilling themselves as individuals. And that's a lot of what the Owl House is about. That's Luz's whole journey. She went to the Owl House and went to Hexside to fulfill being Luz Nocida. I mean, Luz Nocida is still the person that Luz's mom and dad want her to be. But this is one of the things that I really liked in the later seasons, where we find out that Kamala, she really liked her daughter as she was. She was also undergoing the same issue where, like, society was like, no, your daughter needs to be this way. And so she was aiding society and trying to mold her daughter into something she didn't want to be, something she wasn't happy with, and that would make her miserable for the rest of her life. And then when she's like, okay, if you want to live in the Boiling Isles, cool. And that was a pain point in the show. Not, like, in the show from, like, the writing perspective, but, like, for the audience, this was a pain point that we could pick up on. And it created conflict. And that's where Luz was like, I'm going to stay in the human world because I bring suffering everywhere I go, or woe is me, other stuff like that. But this is a thing that what Luz started the entire show out trying to do and be, Amity learned really late. Willow learned really quickly in the grand scheme of the show. And Gus... I feel like Gus was just kind of like himself from the get-go, and then Boscha learns it at the very end of the show. And that's just a huge part of the Owl House's, like, morals, the story writing as a whole. Play.
Are inconstant. Everyone is an unreliable narrator, whether we'd like to admit it or not. Closure is not a thing you find, but rather a state of being that you foster. It's choosing what the final word will be, the punctuation mark at the end of a tumultuous chapter in your life.
Hey, Boscha. Don't think this means I'm finished with you.
Whatever. I didn't do this for any of you.
The friend group Luz cultivates is a multifaceted triumph. Making new connections is hard, especially when you're carrying around a catalog of unresolved traumas.
You must have been friends forever.
It wasn't always like this.
It's tempting to let the fear of future pain dictate your course of action, but that mountain of evidence you've compiled against yourself isn't factual. It's merely an act of self-preservation. Reaching out is terrifying, but you should never stop trying. Authentic relationships are worth fighting for, and there is no limit on your capacity to love. Those false narratives will fade further and further away with each step you take in a new direction, and one day you'll look back and marvel at just how much you've grown. The moral of the story is that teenage girls are ruthless monsters, and you should be proud of yourself for surviving their senseless onslaught of torment.
Boscha could get away with murder if she wanted to.
What's this? Boscha got away with murder? I can't say I approve, but at least she's trying new things.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and all the other YouTube jazz.
We've got 8 Avatar Funko Pops in the background, a Master Chief figurine, that one I'm jealous of, and then easily a dozen Lego minifigures. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Peace.